the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, Amen. I am Father Lazarus. I live in the mountain of St. Anthony in the Red Sea area. I have been here since 1996. I was 1 year in the monastery, or nearly 1 year, and then I came to the mountain. I welcome all the viewers on CYC, on Christian Coptic Youth Channel, and I want to explain why and how our generous Lord God brought me to this place. I was born of Protestant parents. My father especially was a strong Protestant, Methodist. Methodists were dissenting Protestants, not belonging to the mainstream. My mother was much more sympathetic to Roman Catholic Church, but myself and my brothers and sisters, we grew up in that family. I believed in my childhood in the happiness that my mother and father found in their Protestant church. As I grew a little bit older, I tried to believe in everything that they taught me. But by the time I became 11, 12, 13, in those years I started to realize that I didn't have any faith. By the time I was 15, 16, I was sure that I did not believe. Many things brought this about. First of all, personal suffering. I suffered a lot. I was tormented in school because I was different from the other boys. I was beaten. I was often sick. I was against everything which my country stood for. I didn't like the way that Australians live their life for drunkenness and for pursuing sport at all cost, and for living a materialism which is without a soul. So I felt myself alone in the world. I felt myself against everything which was around me, and those who were around me persecuted me. So I grew to adolescence, I grew to early manhood with a feeling that I was completely on the outside of everything. And by this isolation, I completely left faith in God. I had no faith that God could protect me, that He could help me, that He could reunite me with humanity. So because I felt alone even from God. As I grew up, I found that some people were good people, and most people were not good people. So I understood that religion doesn't make a lot of difference. Many people went to church and they were bad people. They cheated on each other, they did wrong things, they spoke badly, they swore, they lived wild lives. But they went to church. They said they were believers. I saw other people who never went to church, who were kind and generous and gave of love. So I had no way in my experience to connect faith in a religion with personal behavior. And this to me made it seem hollow. If I want to go to a church for the sake of the name, okay. But for the sake of love, for the sake of truth, I didn't find it in my experience. So this is why I came to regard religion as hypocrisy. Then my reading reinforced this. The two great influences on my early thought were Sigmund Freud and Karl Marx, and both of them rejected religion as a fantasy, as something which people use to fill up the holes when they haven't any personal power. So they say, okay, God is powerful. If they haven't any love in their hearts, they say, okay, God is love. So what they haven't got in themselves, they say we can get it from God. And Marx and Freud said that this is a failure of humanity. This is the failure of people to rise up to their full potential. And I believed that. So I grew up believing that religion was just like a medicine when you are sick of yourself. I heard about miracles, of course, but I regarded the laws of nature as inviolable. The laws of nature have to be respected. You cannot explain something which is against the laws of nature. So I reasoned that perhaps people, by their mind, which is a very powerful organ, the mind can do many things, people can make influences around on the laws of nature by the power of their mind. And perhaps there are parts of the natural law that we don't yet understand. For example, in space, there are many things like black holes and quarks and things which we don't really understand. After Einstein, we understand more, but we still don't understand everything. Even Stephen Hawking, he doesn't understand everything. So I used to explain it by saying that our partial knowledge of the laws of nature leaves some room for doubt, and our minds themselves can work very great influences on our perception, so that we see things in a different way. So I used to use a rationalistic method of explaining miracles. When I was in the world, I was always searching, and I think this is a condition of most people. Either people are searching for material wealth because they think it will bring peace, or they start searching directly for inner peace through any means, any method. Even Eastern religions, far away from their Western inheritance, through meditations which they have learned from somewhere, anywhere, through all kinds of intoxicants, through drug-related, drug-assisted states of elation. So inner peace is searched for, but is not usually found. Perhaps if you have love, human love, which is perfect, it will give you the gift of peace. But how do you find a perfect love? I certainly didn't. So I searched for inner peace, but I didn't find it by any of the avenues which usually are taken to arrive at it. And I was still believing in it and still searching for it. And this, I think, is a condition of most Western people. They have an idea, like a mirage of inner peace in front of them, and they search for it, and they move toward it, but every time they move toward it, it seems further away. And I was in that state. I did ask all these questions. I found that I must take the answers from those who have gone before me. So I started to read, and I came to what I thought was a reasonable position. I took my history from Marx, I took my psychology from Freud, and I took my poetry from the English Romantics, from Byron and Shelley and Keats. So I made a complete philosophy of life which explained the natural origin of man in a material sense, which explained the purpose of his life as his fulfillment, and I believed that death was the end of everything. I was a materialist in that sense, that the body is material, and when the body dies, the life is extinguished. As when you extinguish a candle, the flame is gone. After death, I didn't believe in anything. I thought that it is the end. Death ends it all. And when the body is in the coffin, I used to work in hospitals during my summer vacations from the university. And many times it was my job to carry the patients who had died during the night down to the morgue. And I remember one night a girl died of, she had enlarged head, elephantitis, I don't know the name exactly. And her head was almost as large as her whole body. Her whole body was so small. And this girl died. And when she died, I didn't put her in the usual trolley, I just picked her up in my arms and just carried her down to the morgue. And she was so cold. And I felt that the little girl that I had seen suffering for a few weeks in the hospital was gone. And that was my first experience of the flatness of death. That the body is inert, it's extinct, and the personality is extinct with it. So my ideas on life, on origin, its purpose and its end, were all materialistically based, but with a kind of romantic flavor in the middle. I believed that there was a purpose and an origin in life, from life, but I did not contribute it to God. I did not accept the thesis that the starting of life was God-driven. I believed in the Big Bang theory, for example, which says that life began in a series of massive exponential explosions which produced all the matter of the universe. I rejected the idea of a creator. I marveled at the creation, and everyone thinks this is a sufficient reason to believe in God, but for me it was not a sufficient reason. Yes, the earth is marvelous, the laws of nature are beautiful, the complicated, even the single structure of the DNA, the double helix, it is a very beautiful thing, but it did not make me think that it had to be created by somebody. The sophistication of the natural process seemed to me sufficient to explain even the complicated and beautiful world of nature. So no, I did not arrive at a creator in my own thinking. I did not see the necessity for a creator. And I did not certainly see any evidence of someone overlooking his creation and following it through. So I never had any idea that God who started it was then looking after it and bringing it to an end. No, I had none of this. I saw no need for this hypothesis. When I was young, of course, I went to the Protestant church with my parents, but after I stopped going with them, I used often to go to Catholic churches for the art. I used to enter many cathedrals and examine the architectural structure of the building, the sculptures, the carvings, any interior paintings. I liked the church architecture. It seemed to me to have a calm and a grace and an authority which was arresting. So I liked to visit, when they were empty, I liked to visit empty churches. I never went to church when it was full. But yes, I did enter many churches, but for artistic reasons, for reasons of the history of that particular church, or for some artistic reason. Yes, in my philosophy studies I did a philosophy of religion section, but it only confirmed my atheism. It only confirmed me in my belief that religion is an hypothesis used to support a need, to fill a need, not a truth. It was not evident to me that philosophy or philosophy of religion could do anything to add to someone whose faith had already petered out and died. It did not resurrect any childhood faith that I had. It only confirmed me in my atheism. Oh, most definitely I believed that historically Christianity was a very bad thing, that it was responsible for many wars which otherwise would never have occurred. The wars of religion are legion. They exist from the beginning of time till now. For example, when I was growing up, the Irish hunger strikers and the Irish peace marches were set amid pitched battles between Protestants and Catholics in Ireland. When I saw the American flag and the American Protestant pride set alongside the war in Vietnam, I was disgusted. So I saw Christianity as a tool used by ruling powers to cover up their warlike imperialist aims against other peoples and cultures. Well, when we have to distinguish between the church and Christianity now. Now I see the church as still being responsible for all the blood that was shed. But the church is not Christianity. Now I make a difference between Jesus and his disciples and those of us who follow in their steps, in the footsteps of the Master. This is Christianity. The church is something else. One of the reasons I'm happy to be in the Coptic Church is that the Coptic Church has very, very little blood on its hands, if any. Mostly the Coptic Church has been persecuted rather than persecuting anybody else. But very few churches can say the same. So as churches go, the Coptic Church is quite respectable because it is historically a victim rather than an oppressor. But I still see no reason to change my opinion that the effect of the hierarchical ecclesial church of the West has been a good thing. No, I don't think it has been a good thing. I think it has been a disastrous thing. Christianity itself is the most beautiful and the most elevating and the most heart-saving thought system that has ever been produced. God's message through His Son to save mankind is a completely different message than the hierarchical Christian church. So I would very insist on this difference between what you see around you as church and what you feel in your heart when you know Christ. Having said that, we can come the full circle, and when you know Jesus, when you believe in Christ, when you believe in God's plan for mankind, then you can find in the liturgy of the church, you can find in the sacraments of the church, an expression of spiritual truth in material things which helps and lifts people and gives people hope. So when you go to a big cathedral and you see an Orthodox bishop praying the liturgy, you feel that matter is glorious. You feel that material things can serve God. So I love and respect the church in its sacramental presence. But historically, there's a lot of reservation still in my mind. In my life, I suffered at the hands of other people, and I suffered from my own doubts and fears and my own weaknesses and follies. So I suffered both externally and internally, and I never felt that I could go somewhere into the sky and find somebody who would help me. God was not a presence in my life. He was not near and close beside me. I never saw Him standing to protect me when boys hit me. I never saw Him come and hold my hand when I was bleeding in my heart. I never felt this. I suffered for years, from 10, 11, 12 till early 20s, and I never found any consolation offered me in God or His so-called presence. So my atheism was not just intellectual, but it was also emotional. I felt myself utterly alone, and I felt no hand extended, only the hands extended to push me down, not to lift me up. So God was nowhere in my estimation. For this I have to explain how I became Christian. This will take some time, so I will embark on this now and I will tell you the story. I did visit India for some time in my youth, and I did read a lot about Buddhism. So these two Eastern religions I did search to see if they could provide some answer. Like many of my generation, I followed the Beatles into their exploration of Hinduism, and then the very favorable reception that Buddhism received in the West, not only from the Dalai Lama's visits, but also from general writing by Western people. But it was a taste only. I didn't arrive at any deep personal commitment to either of these two religions. And I continued atheist, I continued romantic in my own dreams, until my mother died. When my mother died, it left a hole in my life, not because of her so much, not because of her personality so much, although she was a good woman, but what hit me was that I had no mother, I had no source. You asked me about, did I understand the idea of God as the source of life, as the creator of life? Well, I felt after my mother died that I had no origin. My source, the reason for my being had disappeared. The one who gave me birth. This had been cut away, taken away. With my mother's death, I lost my firm balance on I could nowhere to walk on the earth. And I became disoriented. I became lost, even more lost than before. And for 12 months after my mother died, I continued to be angry at her death, to be angry at the supposed consolation of religion that the rest of the family and her friends offered. And after the full year of grieving, I was no closer to any peace, no closer to any balance. Then finally I went back to the hospital where she died. She died of cancer in a Roman Catholic hospital. I went back to the hospital where she died, and I remembered those days of her suffering. And I wanted to go to the room in which she died, where I had slept on the floor next to her for the last 10 days of her life. And I wanted to recapture that moment, to see if I could start again from there, to find some way out of that mystery of death. Death was like a blackness, like a darkness surrounding me. I had no way to understand it. And I had no way to balance my life again without a mother. The nurses at the hospital told me, they were nursing sisters of course, they told me that no, the room is being used, we cannot give you access at the moment, but come after some time and we will show you. So they sent me to the library, because it was a hospital attached to a convent. They sent me to the library to wait there for them. There I found a book about the life of a monk, of an American monk called Thomas Merton. It's called The Seven-Storey Mountain. His autobiography is quite famous. And I read it. The nurses forgot me and I forgot to go down. The book was so engrossing. It was an exact copy of my own life. He was a philosopher, he was left-wing in his politics, and his mother died, and he was a fan of films, and the books that he read were the books that I read. It was a mirror image of my own life, but he in America and me in Australia. So after his mother died, he worked his way to peace in a Roman Catholic monastery. So I thought, on reading this book, well, someone who is so like me, a philosopher, someone who was atheistic for so many years, someone who was intelligent, a critic and judge of his own life and of Western life, and he arrives at peace in a monastery. Well, maybe I can do the same. So I ignored those parts of the book which discussed his growing faith in God. He had a friend in the university who converted him, if you like, to a real faith in God. So I just took the idea, the simple idea from the book, that he exchanged his university for a monastery, and in the monastery he found peace. So I thought, let me do the same. Let me exchange my university for a monastery. So I telephoned to a Roman Catholic monastery the next day, and I asked if I might go and be a monk. The person who answered the phone asked me, well, which church do you come from? I told him, no, I don't go to church. He asked me, which priest, your spiritual father, did he recommend you to us? I said, no, I don't know any priest. I don't have any spiritual father. He said to me, oh, you don't go to church and you don't know any priest, and yet you want to be a monk? I'm sorry. And he closed the phone. So he thought I was crazy, for sure. I had some weird idea of monasticism, and he wasn't going to buy into that. Then I looked in the phone book and I found another monastery. It was called a Serbian Orthodox monastery. Okay, I tried it. I rang and I said, can I come for a visit? And it was the bishop, I found out later. He answered. He said, come and see. Now he used these exact words for a reason. I understood, at the time I didn't connect it, but afterward I understood very well that rather than ask me questions as the Catholic priest did, he didn't want to prejudge the issue, so he just said, come and see. And where did he find that formula of words? From the Bible. When Jesus appeared after John Baptist's arrest, the disciples of John Baptist started to change over to Jesus. And when Philip attached himself to Jesus, he discovered that this is the teacher which we want. And he went to his friend Nathanael, and he said to him, come and see. And Nathanael said, nothing good can come from Nazareth. And Philip insisted, come and see, which is a non-committed. You don't commit yourself to anything, just come and see. And this Serbian bishop said to me, come and see. Well, I was pleased with that, and I said, yes, I'll come. The day I arrived, it was a Saturday. And on Saturdays in the Catholic Church, in the Orthodox Church, Greek Orthodox Church, in the Coptic Church, in all of these sacramental churches, there is a commemoration of the dead on Saturday. And they came from their liturgy just at the time that I entered the monastery. We went to the cemetery where the Serbian people remembered their dead. I was attempting to go in the car with the bishop because he had shaken my hand and welcomed me. He said to me, no, I prefer you to go with this lady and gentleman. I got in the car with them, and I found that they were a couple whose daughter had paid a visit to the monastery and had been killed in a car crash. She was joyriding with some boys up and down the long highway, which was dead straight and dead flat outside the monastery. And the car overturned and she alone was killed. And this couple were bitter. And they said, God has stolen our daughter, killed our daughter. We sent her to his house and he has killed her. They were very bitter. And I was also very bitter. I was saying, yes, my mother has died and God didn't help. If there was any God, he didn't help me. So we were complaining to each other about God being the cause of our misery. So it was, whether the bishop realized it or not, he was giving us a comfort by putting the two most miserable groups together. After the cemetery, the Serbian people went to the church to make a prayer. They make a prayer on that occasion to St. Mary. When we entered the church, there is a big icon of St. Mary on the wall. Now, I had seen icons from time to time as a part of art history, art journals and books, but I knew very little about them, and I certainly had no personal experience of icons at that time. St. Mary I had heard of course. All the world has heard of her, but I knew nothing personally about her because my parents were Protestant and didn't believe that she was anything other than just an ordinary girl who happened to give birth to Jesus. So I had no intimate acquaintance with her as Theotokos, or Mother of God. I had no understanding of her role in in the Orthodox Church. I knew that Catholics called her Virgin Mary, but that was all I knew. And I'd seen some pictures of her in newspapers or magazines, as everybody has seen. But she didn't mean much to me. I went into this church and I found all the people making a matanya, that is bowing down to the icon of St. Mary. And I was astonished, because Australian men don't bow down to anybody. I mean, the usual greeting in Australia is a handshake, and that's it. Even if a taxi driver meets the Prime Minister, he will not bow down to him, he will not kiss his hand, he will not even bend his head unless he wants to. He will just shake his hand and that will be it. So informal and equal greetings between people of very different standing is just the Australian norm. So I had no preparation for the matanya, for the abasing of oneself physically, for bending down to make an obeisance to a figure of abstract power. So I didn't feel easy, but I wanted to be polite. And I saw all the Serbian people make their matanyas to this icon of St. Mary. And after they finished their 3 matanyas, they went to the side of the church where the priest was praying. And the people started to sing hymns to St. Mary with the priest. I thought, okay, let me do what they do. So I tried to make the first matanya. And I stood from standing, let me show you, from standing, I should be erect, I should be homo erectus, I should be a strong man. Then I have to make myself weak. I have to put myself down on the ground. So I tried, bending my knees and bowing down. Okay? So, this was the first part of the effort, the first part of the struggle of the matanya, if I can call it that. Finally, I got down on my knees. Now remember that the icon of St. Mary is in front of me, on the wall, a big icon. It was very famous in Australian religious circles because it had made some miraculous cures. There was a wife of a Greek priest who had cancer, and she was healed by intercession through this icon. And it was well known in Australia. People who are not from that particular church, still they came to visit to see that icon. So I wasn't much concerned about the icon. I was more concerned about making my matanya smoothly and joining the people. Then I had to put my forehead on the floor. Okay, now this was a big difficulty for me. I never did this in my whole entire life. So I tried. I didn't put my fingers correctly, but it doesn't matter. I bowed my head down. So I finally got down to the ground, and when I was in that position, if I might ask you to consider when you make a matanya, what is the position of your body? How does it shape itself? Maybe see yourself from outside, but think about how the shape of your body appears to someone watching you. You are in a half circle, like you are bent over in much the same position as a fetus in the womb. Okay, you look at any picture of a fetus in the womb of its mother. Not exactly like a seahorse, but it's kind of folded around on itself, right? So I was feeling like that. I was feeling that I am in a kind of fetal position, and I'm becoming small, and I'm becoming weak and helpless. So all of these emotions started to overtake me as I made the matanya. The matanya is a physical action, but its effect is very devastating on the psychology, on the emotions. Because it says, you are weak, you are small, you are nothing, you are dust and ashes. It's a statement that I am not worthy to lift up my eyes to you. The matanya is a very eloquent statement of Christian humility. So I was bending down, and all my sadness at my mother's death started to overflow, started to come out from me. And I started to cry. I started to let the tears come, and I started to vocalize my sadness. As I was telling myself, I thought, actually I was praying, I was confessing. I didn't know at the time how God had planned it, but I was outpouring my feelings. I said, I don't have a mother, I have lost my mother, and I want a mother, and I'm sad, and I need why have I not got a mother? Why is there no one with me? So I was pouring out my feelings at being motherless. As I was bending down, I thought, well, I must stand up. So I stood up. And I thought that was the end of it. I thought the next one would be much easier. Because you had to make 3 matanyas. 3 were necessary to complete the rite. I made the second matanya, and this time I repeated the same words that I had said before. And this time, when I came to complain of being motherless, when I said, my mother has died and I feel sad and alone, I was bending my head down on the ground, and I heard a voice behind my head. From somewhere behind my head, I heard a voice say, I will be your mother. And I didn't know who was speaking. I heard the voice clearly. It was a beautiful voice. It was soft, but it was clear. It was sweet, but it was strong. It was a very affecting female voice. And she said, I will be your mother. In English, I said, I will be your mother. And I didn't know who was speaking. So I thought perhaps one of the Serbian women had heard me crying or heard my voice and came to support me. So I looked to the left and to the right to see if any woman had come to offer her help. But no one was there. I was alone. Then I repeated the words, and again the voice came, I will be your mother. So this time I was determined to find out. I lifted up my eyes, and the icon was in front of me on the wall. And as I lifted up my eyes, St. Mary moved out of the icon and stood in front of it. Not her whole body, but it was an icon of her top, her to the waist, and she was in the icon holding Jesus. She herself alone, she just moved out. She put her head out of the icon, like the icon remained on the wall, completely undisturbed, but she appeared as a presence in front of it. And she bent her head toward me, and she looked at me eye to eye, and she smiled, and she said, I will be your mother for the 3rd time. And when she smiled, she was so lovely, and she was so loving, and her words just took all the pain out of my heart, and gave me hope, and gave me faith, and gave me a belief in myself again. All of this happened in an instant of time when she said, I will be your mother. And in that moment, I was made new. I was reborn, if you like. I was made new, made into a new man. by her love, by her eyes, her smile, her voice, her presence. It was something electric which just filled me with a presence. And then she started to give off light. Her whole body started to shine. And I had to lower my eyes and bend my head down. So I made the third Matanya and I finished. Then, as I looked up, as I stood up for the third time, she passed back into the icon, as if she melted back into it. And the icon, the light disappeared and she was gone. The icon became still and it was only a picture. But her presence had been real and her presence had been life-changing. I saw her, I heard her, and I felt her love. And that moment made me dependent on her for all my life. From that moment when I stood up, I knew that my life was now dedicated only to her. That her love for me was so great and sufficient that it would keep me alive. So all my pain, all my doubts, all my fears, all my lostness, all my emptiness, all my need of love, everything was filled by her in an instant of time. And I left that church convinced that I had a mother. I had a loving mother. I had a mother who was not only beautiful and sweet, but she was kind and she was generous and she was so many full things as well. All of this knowledge of her I got by her love, through her love. It didn't need a long time of living with her to know her. I knew her immediately. And she showed herself fully in that moment of time, in her smiling, in the way that she passed her love to me. And every time I've seen her since, it's been the same. I've seen her several times since then. And that's why I couldn't leave that church. I couldn't go away from that monastery. I had to stay with her, and I had to stay near her. And so I stayed in that Serbian monastery. I told the bishop I don't want to leave. And I stayed from that day in the Orthodox monastery. I will tell you shortly about how I changed to the Coptic church, but from that day I was finished with the world. I never went back. I didn't go back to the university. I didn't continue teaching. I didn't continue to live in my house. I abandoned everything for her. So it was as if my full monasticism fell on me with St. Mary's love. And that's how come I became a Christian. Of course I stayed in the Christian church, because where else would I find this loving mother who has given me my new life?